Imagine a city where people are afraid to step outside when darkness falls. A place where in 21 days, 21 lives were brutally taken. The perpetrators weren't deranged old psychopaths or professional criminals. They were two 19-year-old teenagers from well-off families with bright futures ahead of them. But they chose to turn the summer of 2007 into the bloodiest nightmare in Ukraine's history. The most terrifying part? They killed for entertainment. And they recorded everything. Welcome to the Case Files, where we uncover the darkest corners of true crime history. Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing cases of the 21st century, a case that shocked not just Ukraine, but the entire world. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the infamous case of the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs, the Summer of Blood. Setting: the city before the storm. Dnepropetrovsk, now known as Dnipro, is Ukraine's third-largest industrial center, with over 1 million residents. In the summer of 2007, this city bustled like any other European city. Students went home for summer break. Families strolled through parks. Homeless people found temporary shelter on stone benches. Life was peaceful, simple. But beneath that peaceful surface, something was awakening. A plan had been brewing in the minds of two teenagers. And on June 25, 2007, that plan began to become reality. Chapter 1: 3 Boys and the Cure for Fear. Igor Suprunyuk, Viktor Sayenko, and Alexander Hanja. These 3 names had been connected since their school days. Born in 1988, all 3 grew up in well-off families. Their parents were lawyers, doctors, business people with standing in society. Materially, they lacked nothing. But inside the young souls of Igor and Viktor, there were inherent fears. They were afraid of heights. They were afraid of being bullied by friends. And more importantly, they didn't want to live with those fears. At 14 years old, Igor proposed a strange idea. We have to face our fears. We have to conquer them. And their chosen method. Climbing out onto the 14th floor balcony of their apartment building, standing on the thin railing, looking down at the ground 40 meters below. They did this for hours on end, day after day, until their bodies stopped trembling, until their brains stopped screaming, "Danger!" They called it therapy. But this wasn't therapy. This was the beginning of a process of losing the sense of fear, the sense that protects humans from dangerous actions. When heights were no longer frightening, Igor and Viktor sought out a more primal type of fear: blood and death. The road to hell, paved with animal corpses. Igor was the first to propose. If we want to stop fearing blood, we have to get used to it. They started with stray dogs and cats in the woods near their homes. At first, it was just capturing and confining them. But Igor didn't stop there. He wanted to know what it felt like to hold a knife, to feel blood flowing over his hands, to watch life slowly fade away. Viktor followed along. Alexander Hanja also participated, but only for a short time. When he witnessed his 2 friends torture a dog to death, blood splattering on their clothes, Hanja vomited and ran out of the woods. He had hemophobia, fear of blood. And that very fear saved him from the fate of becoming a serial killer. But Igor and Viktor, they weren't afraid. They felt excited. They started recording videos, taking photos, hanging animal corpses from trees like trophies. In one photo later seized by police, Igor stood next to a dog's corpse, hand raised in a Nazi salute, upper lip sporting a mustache like Hitler, his idol. Ironically, Hitler, the man Igor worshipped, was a passionate animal lover. But Igor didn't care about that contradiction. He only cared about power, absolute power over life and death. And then, sometime in June 2007, Igor said to Viktor, "Animals are too easy. We need something harder." Viktor nodded. They were ready. Chapter 2. The First Day of Nightmare, June 25th, 2007. It was already dark when Yekaterina Ilchenko, 33 years old, stepped out of a friend's house. She had just spent the afternoon drinking tea and chatting. Her apartment was only a few streets away. A short walk. Safe. At least that's what she thought. Igor and Viktor were standing on a street corner, holding a yellow plastic bag. Inside was a hammer. When Yekaterina walked past, they exchanged a glance. No words needed. They understood. They followed her. Silent footsteps. The distance grew closer. Did Yekaterina hear the footsteps behind her? Did she feel something was wrong? We'll never know, because the moment she turned her head, a blow to the head knocked her down. Then a second blow, third, fourth. When police found Yekaterina's body, her face was completely disfigured. Her mother, the first person to arrive at the scene, couldn't recognize her own daughter. But that night wasn't over yet. Less than an hour later, Igor and Viktor appeared near the opera house. They saw a homeless man sleeping on a stone bench. His name was Roman Tatarevich. He was dreaming of something. Maybe a full meal. Maybe a warm roof. He would never wake to find out. The hammer was raised again. This time, they weren't in a hurry. They checked their surroundings. No one there. They could do whatever they wanted. When police arrived at the scene, they found Roman Tatarevich still lying on the bench. His head was smashed, blood flowing onto the stone floor. 2 deaths in one night. Same method, same level of brutality. But police hadn't connected the 2 cases yet. They thought these were just robberies gone wrong. They didn't know yet that they were facing a completely different type of criminal. Chapter 3. When Death Becomes a Game. After the success of the night of June 25th, Igor and Viktor didn't feel fear. No remorse. They felt excited, as if they had just overcome a great challenge. "Next time we should record it," Igor said. "Record how?" Viktor asked. "With a phone, to have a souvenir." And so they made a plan. Next time, they wouldn't just kill. They would capture it. They would create a collection. On July 1st, 2007, they struck again. This time in the nearby town of Novomoskovsk. 2 victims, Yevgenia Grushenko and Nikolai Sertchuk. Same method, same level of brutality. On July 6th, 2007, they killed 3 people in one night. Yegor Nechvolodya, 21 years old, a soldier who had just finished his service. He was on his way home from a nightclub. He was attacked right on the steps of his own apartment building. His mother found her son's body when she opened the door the next morning. Yelena Shram, 28 years old, a security guard. She was walking home after her night shift. Igor and Viktor had waited for her on a dark street corner. They didn't just kill her, they also took her bag of clothes to wipe the blood off the hammer. Valentina Hanza, a mother of 3 children. Her husband was disabled, unable to work. She was the family's breadwinner. That night, she didn't come home. 3 families, 3 unspeakable pains. And Igor and Viktor? They went home, washed the blood off their hands, and slept soundly. The escalation and first mistake. On July 7th, 2007, Igor and Viktor made a mistake. This mistake would lead them down the path to their downfall, but not immediately. They went to a fishing pond in the town of Podgorodnoye. There, 2 14-year-old boys, Andrei Sidyuk and Vadim Liakhov, were fishing. They were laughing, joking, enjoying their summer afternoon. Igor and Viktor approached, pretended to make conversation, then attacked. Andrei Sidyuk was killed on the spot. But Vadim Liakhov, in a moment of survival, dove into the water. He dove deep, held his breath, prayed. Igor and Viktor stood on the shore, searching. But they saw nothing. They thought the boy had drowned. They were wrong. Vadim Liakhov survived, and he had seen their faces. When police arrived at the hospital, Vadim described the 2 attackers in detail. Based on his testimony, a composite sketch was drawn. This was the first clue. But it still wasn't enough. The city was large. Thousands of young men looked like that. Igor and Viktor remained free, and they still hadn't stopped. Chapter 4. The Fateful Video, July 12, 2007. Sergei Yatsenko, 48 years old. A father, a husband, a man who had fought cancer and won. He had just bought an old Dnepropetrovsk motorcycle. He loved that bike. On July 12th, he told his wife, "Honey, I'm going to visit our nephew. I'll be back this afternoon." He never came back. Igor and Viktor met him on a dirt road at the edge of the woods. They stopped him, pretended to ask for directions. Then Igor pulled the hammer out of the yellow plastic bag. This time, Viktor set the phone on the ground, turned on the camera, pointed it toward Sergei Yatsenko. What happened next lasted nearly 7 minutes. 7 minutes of brutality beyond words. Mr. Yatsenko didn't die immediately. He was tortured. The hammer struck his head. A screwdriver stabbed into his eyes, into his stomach. He groaned. He begged. Igor said nothing. He just continued, as if doing a job. Methodical. Professional. And throughout that time, Viktor stood behind the camera. Silent. Filming. This video would later be called 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, one of the most horrifying real murder videos ever to appear on the internet. But at this moment, it was just a file in Viktor's phone. A souvenir. A trophy. 4 days later, Mr. Yatsenko's body was found in the woods. His family had searched everywhere. They hung missing person posters. They called the police. They prayed. But he was gone. And his death had been recorded, etched into a video that the world would never forget. Chapter 5. The Peak of Recklessness. After killing Sergei Yatsenko, Igor and Viktor didn't stop. They even became more brazen. On July 14, 2007, they attacked Natalia Mamchur, 45 years old, in broad daylight in the village of Dioskoye. She was riding a scooter. Igor and Viktor, traveling on the motorcycle stolen from Mr. Yatsenko, pulled up close and attacked her with the hammer. This time, there were witnesses. Villagers saw it. They shouted. They gave chase. But Igor and Viktor had disappeared in a cloud of dust. This was a clear sign. The 2 killers were losing control. They were no longer hiding. They thought they were invincible. And this overconfidence would be the cause of their downfall. Chapter 6. The Trap Closes. July 23, 2007. While Igor and Viktor were drowning in their sense of omnipotence, an unprecedented manhunt was being deployed across Dnepropetrovsk. Over 2,000 police officers and investigators were mobilized. This was the largest operation in the city's history. Initially, authorities tried to keep the information confidential to avoid causing panic. But when the victim count rose, 5, 10, 15, then 21, it could no longer be hidden. News spread. People were terrified. Stores closed early. No one dared go out when it got dark. Parents wouldn't let their children leave the house. The city seemed to sink into the darkness of fear. But the clues remained very fragile. Police had the composite sketch from Vadim Lyakov's testimony, the boy who survived. They had traces from the crime scenes, but no clear fingerprints, no reliable witnesses, until July 23, 2007. Igor Suprunyuk's fatal mistake. After each murder, Igor and Viktor would typically take the victim's phone to sell for money. That's how they financed their hobby. That day, Igor brought a phone to a pawn shop in the city center. What he didn't know, police had ordered all pawn shops in the city to keep security cameras on 24/7 and report immediately if there were any transactions involving mobile phones. When Igor turned on the phone to check it, its signal was immediately located. The serial number matched the list of evidence from one of the victims. The shop owner calmly kept Igor there by saying he needed to check the device more thoroughly. Meanwhile, he had pressed the silent alarm button. 5 minutes later, police burst in. Igor was restrained on the spot. He tried to resist, but it was futile. When checking Igor's phone, police found a recent text message sent to Viktor Sayenko. "Where are you? I'm at the shop." They immediately tracked down Viktor. He was at a cafe not far away. When he saw the police, Viktor tried to run, but he didn't get far. Both were arrested. The nearly month-long manhunt was over. But for the investigators, the real nightmare was just beginning when they examined what was in the two suspects' phones and computers. Chapter 7. The Devil's Archive. When police digital experts extracted data from Igor and Viktor's phones and personal computers, they had to witness images that no one could mentally prepare for. Over 300 photos, dozens of videos, all documenting acts of animal torture and murder. Some videos showed Igor and Viktor laughing and joking before committing crimes. Others captured the moment they attacked victims. There were videos of them returning to crime scenes after the fact, checking their work. The most terrifying thing, they also attended some victims' funerals and filmed them. They stood in the crowd, watching families cry, then turned the camera toward each other and smiled. These weren't just the actions of killers. These were the actions of psychopaths with no capacity for empathy. When interrogated, Igor denied all charges. He said police had coerced him. He said the videos were fake. He said he was innocent. Viktor was silent. No resistance, no defense, but also no admission. Only Alexander Hansa, the old friend who had separated long ago, cooperated. He admitted participating in minor robberies and animal torture in the past. But he insisted he had not participated in any murders. The evidence supported his side. He didn't appear in any murder videos. He had alibis for most of the cases. Police concluded there were only two killers: Igor Suprunyuk and Viktor Sayenko. Chapter 8. The Trial of the Century, Where Pain Meets Indifference. In June 2008, the trial officially began in Dnepropetrovsk. This wasn't just a criminal trial. It was an event that captured the attention of the entire world. Hundreds of reporters from across Europe poured in. The courtroom was heavily guarded. Outside, crowds gathered, some holding banners demanding the death penalty. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick. Families of the 21 victims sat facing the glass cage, where the 3 defendants were held. Each of their faces bore indescribable pain. Each gaze was directed toward those who had taken their loved ones. The defendants' attitudes. Igor Suprunyuk sat upright, his face cold. He frequently yawned, flipped through books, or smiled provocatively at the victims' families. When asked about the videos, he said, "I didn't do anything. That's edited footage." Viktor Sayenko was silent most of the time. He didn't look anyone in the eye. His lawyer argued that he had been psychologically controlled and dominated by Igor, that he was only an accomplice under duress. Alexander Hansa appeared remorseful. He cried when hearing the family's accounts. He apologized for not stopping his 2 friends from the beginning. Irrefutable evidence. The prosecutor presented over 300 photos and dozens of videos. Each image was a knife twist into the hearts of the victims' families. The most shocking moment, when the 7-minute video of Sergei Yatsenko's murder was shown. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Only the choked sobs of Mr. Yatsenko's wife could be heard. She clutched her daughter tightly, not daring to look at the screen. But the sound, her husband's groans, still echoed through the room. Some jury members left the room, unable to continue. Some cried. Some covered their faces. And Igor Suprunyuk? He sat still, without a single expression. This was the moment when everyone in the courtroom understood. They weren't facing ordinary criminals. They were facing people without souls. Chapter 9. The Verdict. Justice Served. On February 11, 2009, after 8 months of trial, the court issued its final verdict. Igor Suprunyuk, guilty of 21 murders, torture, armed robbery. Sentence, life imprisonment, with no possibility of pardon. Viktor Sayenko, guilty of 21 murders, torture, armed robbery. Sentence: life imprisonment, with no possibility of pardon. Alexander Hanza, guilty of armed robbery, animal torture. Sentence: 9 years imprisonment. When the verdict was announced, applause erupted from the victims' families. Some people cried. Some embraced. But no one felt completely relieved. Because justice can punish crimes, but it cannot bring the dead back. Chapter 10. The Unanswered Question. Why? After the trial ended, one question still haunted everyone. Why? Why did 2 teenagers from well-off families with bright futures choose this path? Criminal psychology experts analyzed, not for money. The money they made from selling victims' phones and belongings was only a few $100s. Far too little compared to the crimes. Not for revenge. The victims were completely random. There was no connection to the perpetrators. Not for sex or ritual. There were no signs of sexual assault or religiously ritualistic behavior. So for what? The only answer, and the most terrifying answer: they killed for entertainment. For Igor and Viktor, taking another person's life was a sport, a game, a way to test their courage and overcome their own fears. They wanted to create a collection of snuff videos, films documenting real murders, as souvenirs, and possibly to sell on the dark web. Their pleasure came from the act of violence itself and absolute domination over the victim. They were the embodiment of classic psychopaths. No capacity for empathy, no conscience, no ability to feel others' pain. They were predators in human clothing. Chapter 11. The Nightmare's Legacy. After the trial, life continued, but the scars remained. Alexander Hanza was released in 2018 after serving his sentence. He disappeared from the spotlight, living anonymously somewhere in Ukraine. Igor Suprunyuk and Viktor Sayenko are currently serving their sentences in different prisons in Ukraine. They are held in solitary confinement, not allowed contact with other inmates for fear of attack. Under Ukrainian law, they will never be released. But the story doesn't end there. The 3 Guys 1 Hammer video was leaked onto the internet. No one knows exactly who distributed it, but it spread quickly on dark web forums, then spilled over to mainstream websites. Millions of people watched it, some out of morbid curiosity, some wanting to understand the nature of evil, some simply wanting to test their own endurance. But for the family of Sergei Yatsenko, this was an indelible pain. The death of their loved one had become a show on the internet. Something for people to comment on, share, discuss. Mr. Yatsenko's wife once said in an interview, "They killed my husband twice. Once with a hammer. Once with that video." Chapter 12. Lessons from Hell. The Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs case leaves more questions than answers. Could people like Igor and Viktor be detected early? Psychology experts say there are signs. Animal torture behavior in adolescence is a major red flag, but not everyone who tortures animals becomes a murderer, and not every parent knows what their child is doing in the woods behind the house. Did the internet play any role in promoting the crime? Igor and Viktor lived in the first era when murder videos could be recorded on mobile phones and easily shared. They knew that what they created could become content on the dark web. Did this encourage them? Possibly. Could the families have prevented it? Igor and Viktor's parents were both educated people with status, but they had no idea what their children were doing. Or perhaps they saw signs but chose denial, hoping it was just a teenage phase. There are no easy answers, no simple solutions. But one thing is certain. Evil exists, and sometimes it wears the face of people who look very ordinary. The Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs case is one of the darkest chapters of the 21st century. It's proof that evil needs no reason. It doesn't need poverty, doesn't need hatred, doesn't need religion or politics. Sometimes evil exists simply because it can. 21 people lost their lives in the summer of 2007. 21 families lost their loved ones, and millions of people around the world had to face a terrifying truth. Monsters are real, and they don't always hide in the darkness. Sometimes they walk in the sunlight, laugh with friends, and live in houses just like yours. A warning: if you see anyone, especially teenagers, engaging in animal torture, don't ignore it. Don't think it's just kids being naughty. This could be the first sign of a serious psychological problem. If you're a parent, pay attention to your children. Not just about grades or friends, but about what they're doing when no one's watching. And if you experience violence, speak up. Don't stay silent, because silence can cost someone their life. Thank you for watching the Case Files. If you found this story meaningful, please share it so more people can learn the lessons from the past. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other intriguing cases. And remember, justice may come late, but it will come. See you in the next episode.